apparently they were very racist.
Oh, the Scandinavians.
Towards the Aboriginal people.
Okay.
I mean, everyone was racist towards the Aboriginal people.
Okay.
Though, and that's like, so the Aboriginal people would be the only true Canadians. But that's a whole history that, do you know much about that?
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the one to tell you about it. There's many people who would better tell you about it.
But what is it in like 2-3 lines?
I mean, so essentially you had like the Aboriginal people. So the people who were like native to Canada before Columbus and before like Canada got settled or colonized by the European nations. And then from there they have many different like tribes and regions and whatnot. But so yeah, essentially they moved over and they kind of at first just like took the land. And they just kind of forced the Aboriginal people into like areas. But they also, like the first settlers needed the Aboriginal people to survive because they didn't know how to survive Canadian climates. They didn't know how to survive Canadian winters. They didn't know how to hunt, all that stuff. So at first they kind of worked with them and then, but they always like took advantage of them and treated them very bad. And then so they were kind of, the Aboriginal people were like forced to sign treaties and then they kind of wanted to kill off the Aboriginal people. You could call it a genocide. I think many people do. So like there was one things where they would trade with the Aboriginal people and they traded blankets to the Aboriginal people that they knew had like smallpox or smallpox, but some disease.
Yeah, smallpox.
To like, I don't know if smallpox was the exact disease.
Okay.
Someone should double check me on it. But to purposely give the Aboriginal people these diseases and stuff. And it was just like constant over hundreds of years of just either forcing the Aboriginal people to sign treaties or just kind of taking the land and pushing them out. And then in like and then this is something that was in the news maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It was big news, international news. So they had these things in like, the first one opened up in the 1700s or 1800s. And then the last one closed only in like 1980 or something. But most of them closed by like 1950s, 1960s. But essentially they had these residential schools. But like these only closed quite recently. And what they would do is they would take Aboriginal kids away from their families and they'd send them to these residential schools. And they were run by the Catholic Church. But these residential schools were horrible. Like kids got raped, they were like abused constantly. And like the idea was to get the Indian out of the kids. Or like to get the native and try to erase the culture of the Aboriginal people. And people knew it was horrible, but it wasn't really something that was talked about. Because, in like the history, they didn't sell that as part of Canadians' history of what happened to the people there. But like some people knew about it and stuff. And obviously, you can see the result of it today. But then a few years ago, they discovered a bunch of unmarked graves next to like one of the schools. And then that started a thing where they started to look next to all these schools, and they found a bunch of like unmarked graves from children and from people at the schools. And that was going on until like the 50s and stuff. And then in like the 60s, there was something called the 60s scoop, where they didn't have Aboriginal schools, but they took a lot of the kids away from they didn't have as many residential schools yet, but they still like took a bunch of the kids away from their parents and stuff and sent them off to like the foster care and for adoption, mainly the foster care system, which is also horribly run in Canada. But so now I think Aboriginal people are a very small percentage of Canadian population, but they're very marginalized. Like they make up a much higher percentage of the imprisoned population with like alcohol problems and drug problems and with mental health issues, because for like generations they've been like abused and just swept under the rug and stuff. And the country's trying to do stuff to make it better now, but like how much can you really do? And like they say they try to do stuff and things, and But I mean, it's a very complicated issue to fix.
But what can you do right now? You can't do anything about it.
Not too much. So I mean, I know. So where I'm from, it's called unceded territory. So where I'm from is the western part of Canada. So the most recent part to be colonized and settled, and a lot of the land, the Aboriginal people never actually signed treaties. Yeah. So there is land that's considered Aboriginal land, and there's still like representations of the tribes and of the different tribes in Aboriginal nations that own some of that land still. So that's one thing that they do. But then when they want to build an oil pipeline to take oil to the thing, then they don't really regard Aboriginal land, and you know what I mean? Because then the money comes into play, and then so there's some stuff like that. They also get opportunities, like I think they get free university, and they get some money from the government and stuff like that. But it's like nothing in comparison to how they've been treated for all this year. And then there's still a lot of racism and stuff towards Aboriginal people in Canada just because of stigmatizing them and they're just kind of not considered as, like, they don't get treated as well, or their problems don't get taken as seriously, like, from police and stuff like that.
Oh.
Like, in BC, where the province I'm from, there's a whole thing about, like, many missing Indigenous women, and just, like, the lack of resources that went into, like, finding them and stuff compared to if it was, like, some white girl going missing, you know?
Mm.
So a lot of that is still existing today.
Yeah.
So that's the dark side of Canada.
Oh, that is, huh?
But yeah.
I've only known one dark side about Canada. What the India-Canada was. when they closed borders for all the Indians.
Was that, like, I mean, Canada's done a lot of racist shit. Every country has. But which one are you talking about recently?
Yeah, the one we spoke about, the one with Punjab.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but there's another darker story.
Oh.
Again, I don't have this shit out the top of my brain because
No.
I wasn't there. But there was a boat that came from India. I think it was to Vancouver as well. Maybe you can look this up.
Yeah, I don't know the story.
And I think it was mainly Sikhs, but I'm not sure. But it was a boat that came from India.
From India to Canada?
To Canada.
Like to Vancouver?
Yeah.
That's like through the Pacific.
Yeah, and they didn't let them into Canada. And then, like, hundreds of people died on board of the boat just waiting to enter the country.
There's no way they sailed from India to Canada. Like, through the Pacific, there's no chance they did that.
1914, sorry. On May 23rd, 1914, 376 Indian immigrants, mostly Sikhs, but including Muslim and Hindu migrants, as well, steamed into Vancouver Harbor on the Japanese ship Komagatamaru in search of a newborn city. And I think they were denied entry, so 376, and then I think they all died just waiting to try and enter into Canada on board.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
But who was running Canada that time? The British, right?
No, 1914 Canada was its own country.
Ah, when did you guys get your independence?
You should know that, eh?
In the 18s?
Late 18s.
Okay.
1867.
Okay.
That's something we can also look up.
Okay.
But yeah, they traveled from India to Hong Kong to British Columbia. That's Canada.
Oh, yeah, okay. Oh.
British Columbia is like the province I'm from. It's Vancouver.
Okay.
In the weeks that followed, so they didn't get let into the country. And then in the weeks that followed, conditions on the ship, including access to food and water, grew desperate. The local South Asian community rose to the defense of the passengers, formed a committee, raised large amounts of money, and hired a lawyer to challenge the restrictive immigration laws. A test case was put in the courts, yada, yada, yada. Finally, thanks to local South Asian communities, food and water to the ship. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau apologized in May 18th, 2016.
Thanks, man.
Canada always apologizes well after. Okay, so eventually they entered. but 22 people were dead, and then the 200 surviving passengers were imprisoned. But that was one thing. But yeah, I mean, I guess every country has racist pasts.
Yeah.
Like Canada kind of gets this like reputation that it is like that nice, chill country that hasn't done.
Yeah. Because even for me, Canada is always a nice country.
Yeah.
Very
I
sweet.
mean, because to be fair, Canada has let in a lot more immigrants than most other countries have in the world.
Yeah.
But it's like, and I think like a lot of that policies of Canada I really respect, and I really like. Like there is like kind of a melting pot, like in Canada, because it's such a young country. No one, as I said, no grandparents were born in Canada. Everyone kind of feels Canadian. Like having an Indian father, you never feel like not, you know what I mean? It's like the immigrants kind of created Canadian culture and what it is. And I think in general, it's very accepting. It's quite accepting to immigrants and quite open society and stuff like that. But it's built off of stealing the land from the Aboriginal people and a small genocide probably.